Hello those students and welcome to your mathematics lesson. In today's lesson we're looking at the topic earth geometry. Under earth geometry we're looking at the key concepts of earth geometry and what earth geometry is. The first thing we need to do is understanding what we mean by the term earth geometry. What do we mean when we say earth geometry? Well, we can say earth geometry is a topic where we learn about calculations that involve figures on the earth's surface. And we know that the earth is a sphere, so sometimes earth geometry will be referred to as spherical geometry. In this topic, we'll be covering ways in which we can calculate from a point, let's say point 1 to a point, let's say 2. Under earth geometry, there will be a lot of calculations, but to understand these calculations, this is where we come to learn about the key concepts. So without further ado, we'll get into those key concepts. The first thing we need to know under earth geometry is simply what the lines on the sphere mean. We've got lines here, some understand what they are, some don't. So before you do any earth geometry, you need to understand that on the earth we've got two kinds of lines, latitudes and longitudes. Latitudes are lines on the earth that are drawn in a horizontal manner. So they are drawn from left to right. This means the latitudes are these lines, like the one that has been pointed to. So this is a latitude, and this is also a latitude. So in this diagram, we've got three latitudes. However, when latitudes are being measured to find their measures, we can call them, or their names sometimes as they might be referred to, they are measured from north to south. So their last parts will have parts like degrees north or degrees south. So don't get confused by those two principles of them being drawn horizontally but being measured from north to south. Now we go to longitudes. What are longitudes? Well, like you can guess, longitudes are just the other lines that are left that are being drawn in a vertical manner. They run from west to east, or simply they are measured from west to east. These two lines must be really understood when we're talking about earth geometry, as if you confuse the two, it will be very difficult to understand other principles like locating points on the earth. Now, let's look at another key concept that's very essential for us to get a basic understanding of earth geometry. These are some important lines of latitude that are found on the earth and some important lines of longitude that are also found on the earth. We're going to start with latitudes just like we did. The first latitude we're going to look at is the equator. So what is the equator? The equator is a line of latitude that is at the center of the earth, and we can say it's the biggest latitude you find in the group of these latitudes. Because of this, it cuts the earth into two parts. If we were to look at the equator from the top of the earth like a bow, the equator will just look like a circle as it has been shown in this diagram here. The equator divides the earth into the northern part and the southern part. However, these parts are not just called parts like you may see, they are called hemispheres. The name hemisphere is just simply from hemi, which means half, and sphere, which just means the shape of the earth here. We also have another latitude, which is the Arctic Circle. The Arctic Circle is a line of latitude that is found at the angle 66.5 degrees north. So this is a latitude that is found in the northern hemisphere because of this indication, the N there, and it's found at an angle of 66.5 degrees. To get to know how these angles are measured, you can be sure to check out our videos that will be posted later under the topic of earth geometry. The Arctic Circle, if we're to look from the top of the Earth, will be a smaller circle, like you can see in this diagram. It's indicated in red so that you cannot mistake it for the equator. If you've been asking what that dot is, it's just the North Pole. The Arctic Circle is also very important. You should know where it is in case you find a question that relates to it. However, we move to another line of latitude that's equally important, the Tropic of Cancer. The Tropic of Cancer is found at 23.5 degrees north. This is the other line of latitude you should remember when we're talking about the northern hemisphere. If we look at the top, it will look like that line which is indicated in red. So with this said and done, now we go to the other side of the hemispheres, which is the southern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, we have got latitudes at the same angles but with different names. So we're going to start with the one furthest, which is at 66.5 degrees, which is the Antarctic Circle. The Antarctic Circle is found in the southern hemisphere at the same angle at which the Arctic Circle is found. As you can see, the name differs as we're in the southern hemisphere, so all the latitudes will have S instead of N. It's very essential to note those differences also. We also have another line of latitude, which is the Tropic of Cancer, the same angle of the Tropic of Cancer. It's the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. If you look at the top for the Tropic of Capricorn, it will be just in the same part, but this time we're using some dotted lines so that you can see it's hidden. With that said and done, we're done with the latitudes. Now we go and shift to the longitudes. Longitudes are also very important lines on the earth as they enable us to find the difference in time between 2 points, to find the distance between 2 points, and so on and so forth. Now, to be able to do this, it's because we know of one very important longitude, which is the prime meridian. The prime meridian is found in the center, also just like the equator. So it's got a similar purpose with the equator. If we were to look on top to see this representation of our three-dimensional sphere, which is pointing to the earth, we will see something like this. The red line there shows the prime meridian, which might also be referred to as the Greenwich meridian sometimes. So this is how everything will look like on top. Now, we talk about a bit more on the prime meridian. So we've got the prime meridian and the equator here in this diagram. Now, we know the equator divides into northern and southern parts. What does the prime meridian do? Well, it just divides the earth into western and eastern parts. So those longitudes that will fall on the left of this longitude will have degrees west, while those on the right will have degrees east. With that said and done, we move to another principle which is very important also. This concept is about the radius of the earth. Under earth geometry, you hear many times the radius of the earth being referred to. What is it? Well, the radius of the earth is just a constant that is equal to the distance from the center of the earth to the circumference of a great circle. There's been a lot of words involved here, but first we're going to target what the name or word great circle means. What is a great circle? Well, great circles are just these lines on the earth that can be either a longitude or a latitude that have got their center, which is the same as the center of the earth. For example, the equator. We said the equator is the largest latitude. So we've got its center at the same point where the center of the Earth is. So when we talk about radius, this diagram can simply explain that. In this diagram, we've got the equator and the prime meridian being used to show what we mean by the distance from the center of the Earth to the circumference of the great circle. Now, you should understand that the radius of the Earth is the same as the radius of the equator and all longitudes. For latitude, it's only the equator, but for longitudes, all of them are equal to the radius of the Earth. This is simple, as it's illustrated in the diagram here. You can see no matter where the longitude is, it will be still taking full length. If we get one here, you can see it will move from this point until that point, passing through the center. So because of this, all longitudes will have their radius equal to the radius of the Earth. Now, what is this constant? This constant is given in two units. The first one is in kilometers and the other one is in nautical miles. In kilometers, the radius of the Earth is 6,370 kilometers, and while in nautical miles it's 3,437 nautical miles. With this said and done, today's lesson covering the key concepts of Earth geometry is done. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out for our other video that will be posted later on Earth geometry.